Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you've had a great week, a restful week, and I hope you're doing okay. Thank you so much for all the support I have been receiving on my latest videos. I really appreciate every single comment. This week, I thought I would do a video that I had put up on my Instagram story a couple of weeks ago, alongside the how to journal one, and that is about commonplacing. There's a lot to be said about commonplacing, and I'll definitely link below some very useful videos I watched to kind of understand it better. So if you don't really know what commonplacing is, or you're struggling on how you want to commonplace, please watch this video and hopefully it helps you in some way. So I guess the first place to start is, what is commonplacing? So let's start with what is commonplacing. And this is kind of a difficult one for me to grasp when I first started commonplacing. As most of us in this community, I first came across it through Megan Rhiannon, and she would use a commonplace book, and I was very intrigued by it, but I couldn't grasp what it actually was. So I did a lot of research, and I guess the best way I kind of define commonplacing to help people understand it is like an analog Pinterest or Tumblr for like us millennial / Gen Z people. So what I mean by that is kind of like how on Tumblr or Pinterest you kind of curate what you see and pin it or reblog it to your profile based on what you're into and what you want to compile. So you might be specifically interested in book quotes, so you might reblog or pin those, or you might really be into different art or fashion or specific like fandom, so you hoard those to your profile. A commonplace book is like an analog version of that. So anything you see that really sticks to you, that you want to remember, or you want to come back to, or it made you feel a certain way, so you would like to write it down somewhere, a commonplace book is for that. And that's why it's commonplace, because it's kind of like a catch-all. So like think about everything you might screenshot and put into your phone camera roll or save on Instagram, but you don't do anything with them. You save them or you screenshot them, but they just stay there collecting digital dust. A commonplace book would be somewhere where you can actually put that into. So it's kind of like a book of knowledge curated by you, and it's very personal to the person. So historically, and I will link videos because I'm not like the most authoritative source, and there are definitely better videos out there, but I'll link Ellie's Books did a really good video explaining a little bit more about the history. And if you'd like a more academic, true to the historical version kind of breakdown of what a commonplace book is, then Park Notes is someone that I very much admire and love, and I'll put his videos down below as well. So like commonplace books have been used throughout history. They've been used in ancient Greece, all the way to like contemporary writers. So it is something that you might see, especially writers doing it. So I would say that is what a commonplace book is. It's like a catch-all, almost like a fishing net of fish. And in this context, the fish is like symbolic for whatever you want it to be that you want to keep. So like if I get my commonplace book here, I write down a lot of articles and quotes, definitions of words I come across that I don't know because I want to like expand my vocabulary, and those are what's important to me. And I'll get into like how you could other ways you can use your commonplace books a bit later. But yeah, that's how I would define what a commonplace book is. So I guess like the next place to go on to is why you should commonplace. And I know I wrote should, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. Like, there is no pressure and there is no shame and there is no like sort of judgment. I just love commonplacing, and it really is a writing practice that has helped me, and I will get into that as well as like how it has helped me. But if you're thinking about commonplacing, and it's almost commonplacing is such a commonplace books are so vast that it's almost like one of those things that become hard to understand because it's such a like vast thing. Is so all encompassing that it becomes hard to just pinpoint, and sometimes that can be kind of confusing. I don't know if I'm making sense there, but I know that when I first started researching commonplacing, I was a bit confused. I was like, what is this actually meant for? And then I guess I learned that it can be meant for anything you want it to be meant for, and that's how your commonplace books become shaped. It's through you. So if you're thinking about wanting to commonplace, but you don't know why you want to commonplace or why you should do it, because it can, I know like there's a lot of attitudes lately about how commonplacing is this like new fad in the community, but it really isn't. Commonplacing has been done for centuries and millennia. It was done by like philosophers in ancient Greece, and it was done by famous writers throughout history. And there are people in the community like Megan Rhiannon who have been doing it for years. So just because it's got this almost resurgence, and I love the fact that it's becoming so popular because it's such a good thing to become popular, you know. But just because a lot of people are getting into it now doesn't mean that it's like a trend. I've been doing it for over a year now, and I can definitely say that this is something I hope to do for the rest of my life. But if you want to know why commonplacing might be a good option, is because it's information you can reference. So kind of going back to what I said before about how sometimes you can screenshot images and just keep them in our camera roll, and you might be like, oh, I read this really good quote lately, and then you're scrolling through your camera roll or you're scrolling through Instagram in your saved collection trying to find it, and it's difficult because you have so much saved. Commonplacing is like a system to reference all those tidbits that you want to collect, whether that's quotes or recipes or really anything that you want to reference. So it's information that you can reference, and the whole point of commonplacing is to make accessing the information easy. And so there's different kind of like reference systems that you can do. Also, I think physical over digital. Everything is digital nowadays. Honestly can't even remember the last time I printed out a photo and kept it in like a physical what's the word? Photo album. Everything is digital, everything is a PDF or a JPEG. Being able to convert those digital things into a physical copy is very important and it's a very important practice. Even if you think, okay, let's say in 1,000 years, some archaeologist digs up your commonplace book and in it is quotes from a fan fiction that you read. And you might be thinking, no one, how is that important to civilization? Well, the truth is, it doesn't matter because it's important to you. And turning those digital things into a physical copy so that you can come back to it and that you're almost, what's the word? Like you're keeping it alive. I think that's important. I love looking through my commonplace books and seeing things that really meant a lot to me, seeing them in a physical form. I don't know if that makes sense. And I guess another reason is it helps you remember. So like it helps you remember all those things. It kind of goes back to like what I was saying about information you can reference. Sometimes we forget what inspired us. We forget what we came across because it's just a habit to save, save. And so we don't really come back to it in that sense. So keeping it in your commonplace books that you can flip through, you can remember what inspired you. And I think that is really cool. So you might have figured out why you should commonplace, but then the next place is where do I start and how to start? There really is no right or wrong way to commonplace. You don't need any fancy books or equipment. There are people who do commonplacing through flashcards. And that is a whole other way that you can like Google if that's the kind of route you want to take. But most people, they commonplace in a book, and honestly, like there is no right book. When I started commonplacing, I saw that Megan Rhiannon used these ones, field notes. And the reason why I used field notes, and I used field notes for about 10 months. I went through about 8 of these bad boys, 8 or 9 of these, and I loved it. And the reason why I loved it was because I was so new to commonplacing. I really didn't want a chunky book, because then I would feel pressured to fill it up and guilty if I didn't fill it up because I was new to this and I wasn't sure whether or not I would stick to it. So if I didn't fill up this book, it would be okay because it's literally just a really thin book. And if I did fill it up, then it's a small victory. So I would say if you want to start commonplacing and you've never done it before, a smaller book where it's very easy to fill it up would probably be a better way to start because it really takes the pressure off and is less daunting. So this is the first ever commonplace book I did. The first ever one. And a lot has changed since I started here because I almost didn't know what to do. So I was looking at what other people were writing and I was kind of copying them. So if you're thinking about how to start, it's what are you into? So when I first started, I almost kind of used it for a bit of everything. Like I stuck in random bits. I would write some journal entries. I would write quotes. I started learning physics. So it was really all over the place. My handwriting was really nice back here. Yeah, so it's like really all over the place. And I was just writing about anything. I wrote about a random ramble. I started studying graphology and then right towards the end, I start getting into quantum physics. So really it is a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. And it took about 8 of these books to figure out what I'm into. So just know that the whole process would be a lot of trial and error. So is this the latest one? Yeah, so this is the last one I used in a field notes book, and this is the one that kind of cemented how I want to start commonplacing. So from like this, getting to this took about 10 months of commonplacing. And when I was commonplacing in this first book, I was doing it just to do it. And I was like, I still don't get why people do it. I don't get why people commonplace. I was kind of just finding things to write. And what changed from this book to this book was I realized what I wanted to store, like what I wanted to collect, and I figured out what I liked through a lot of experimenting. So maybe look on your Instagram or Pinterest or Tumblr and see what you naturally gravitate towards. What are you used to like saving? Maybe it's quotes, and I know lots of us do quote in our commonplace books, and that's one thing that I really use my commonplace books for, is to quote, to write down quotes. But you might also be into doodling, so I like drawing in my commonplace books. I like writing. I love reading essays and articles and writing those down as well, because I want to remember what I took away from that article. And so now my commonplace books are very much a place of creativity. I want to write down any fiction or quotes or non-fiction texts I've read that really inspired me. I want to keep those in my commonplace books, but I also want to write my own things in my commonplace books. So I have a dot here that says creative writing. So I write my own, I workshop my own poems and stuff in my commonplace books too. So that's kind of like how to start. So very briefly, I'll say you don't need anything fancy, just a book if that's how you want to commonplace. I know some people do it. They have like a digital commonplace book, and honestly, for me, I would say like it kind of defeats the purpose a bit, but I'm not judging. So any book, I would recommend a smaller, thinner one if you've never done it before, because it really eased off the pressure. And if I did quit commonplacing, I wouldn't feel guilty that I kind of wasted a big book. So that's where I would start, and just be open to the fact that there is a lot of experimenting with commonplace books. You might not stick to the same key. I've literally changed my key 100 million different times. So don't be put off by the fact that you will adapt your system, because that's what it is. It's a system, and you have to adapt it when you learn more about it. So because commonplacing is a referencing system, if you want to be able to reference things and go back to them, you will need to be able to have a good indexing system. So you've probably seen throughout the community that loads of people use colored dots, and that's simply because, well, that's what Megan Rihanna did. So I kind of copied her, and I know a lot of people have done the same thing. It's just because that's what she did, and we kind of started with her. But you don't have to do colored dots. You don't need to go buy them. You could do highlighters. So you could write you could write the topic, and then you could underline it, or you can highlight it, or you can write it in the margin. You can use a different pen. So for quotes, you might use one colored pen, and then for something else, you might use another colored pen. So indexing is really personal. Don't feel pressured to use index dots like these ones just because you see me do them or someone else do them. These are purely, you know, us just being a bit extra. There's so many people, like if you go on Tumblr and search commonplace books, there's so many people that just write the topic in the margin and then underline it, and that's how they reference it, is they'll look at the margin and see what they wrote, and then they know what that specific thing is about. So those are some of the different ways you can index, and I'm sure there's like a million other ways, like numbering, all sorts of things, but some of the ways that I thought you could try is, you know, color dots, but not necessary, and also a bit extra, if we're being honest. Highlighters, everyone probably has highlighters, so that's probably the most accessible way to start indexing, or underlining different pens. On the topic of indexing, how to index is something I've struggled with since the beginning of commonplacing. And if I take you back to my very first commonplace book, the key I had was very much similar to Megan Rhiannon's key, because again, I didn't know where to start. So sometimes the easiest thing to do is just copy someone else as like a starting point and then grow from there. So I didn't exactly copy her key because she had some things that I wasn't gonna do. Like I'm not autistic, so I wouldn't have a key for autistic things. But I had red, which was personal, lists, medical, green, which was copied text / special interest, blue, which was important notes or work, and then yellow, which was quotes. And my system has changed so much from this because I realized I don't want my commonplace book to be personal. I don't want to write my personal stuff in here. So very quickly I took out the personal category. Copied text and quotes I struggled with a lot because I felt like they kind of merged together at some points. And then I feel like blue just kind of became redundant after a while, and I felt like there were so many things that didn't fit into any of these categories, so I really struggled. And what would happen is, halfway through the book, I don't know if I did it in this one, but most of the time what would happen is halfway through the book I would write up a new key because I didn't do it in this one. I definitely did it in my second one. I would write a new key because I would want to add something or take something away. Something that really helped me to kind of figure out what I wanted to, like how I wanted to break up my categories, is using themes. So if you go back to like the historical commonplace books, how they used to break their information up into different categories was they usually would use themes like politics, religion, philosophy, like they'd break it up like that. And so I thought, why not when I went into this commonplace book, I thought, why not just try that? Like, why not just try indexing using themes? So instead of categories, I was like, okay, pink would be love and relationships. So anything that comes under that, regardless of whether it's a quote or an article, if it came under that, I'll tag it with this. Blue, or light blue, was academia and knowledge. Green was the human condition, so about self-growth and mental health. This teal color was ideas and creativity, and then purple was culture, politics, society. And although I didn't stick with this, like I did it for the whole book, but although I didn't stick with this, doing this was very useful in figuring out what I wanted or how I wanted to index my topics. So it's like going back to like how to start is experimenting is very helpful, and you won't know things until you experiment. It's kind of like once you push yourself outside of the box, you find the boundaries of where your box ends. I don't know if that makes sense. So what else I did? Something else I did was I would use different colors. So if I wrote in blue, it was my commentary or personal inputs to whatever I was reading. So, no, not from whatever I was copying. So, if I copied out a quote and I had some thoughts on it, I would write it in blue. And this was a very interactive commonplace book for me, and I loved this commonplace book. I thought it was so fun to just look at things that I was into and break it down into themes, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing my responses to things. But once again, it wasn't the most useful because there were things that just didn't come under any of these themes. And while it was fun for the specific book, I knew I didn't want to stick with it. So in my most recent commonplace book, and this is the theme that has been working for me, not theme, this is the key that has been working for me, is light blue is art, ephemera, or media. Pink is creative writing, but also just any kind of thoughts that I have. Blue is definitions. Green is notes, so it kind of replaces copy text, but it's more vague because sometimes I don't copy down an article word for word. I kind of just write it in my own words, so I felt notes was a better category rather than copy text. And then purple for quotes, and then I have my blue ink for commentary and analysis, and then red is just whatever I really find important. I will do a red asterisk, and this has been working for me, and I don't think I'm gonna change it for now anyway, because it's been working so well for me. So all that to say that it took about a year to figure out a key that worked for me. So just know that indexing isn't something you're gonna probably get on the first go. It's just a lot of trial and error, and that's fine because it's a learning curve. You kind of grow with your system, so just give yourself grace and allow for that. So my apologies if this sheet is starting to look a bit cramped now, but the last section I guess I'd like to talk about is just some tips, because I've been doing it now for over a year, and I definitely have some advice that I wish I knew back when I started. So the first one is, don't feel pressured by other people's commonplace books. Someone else might use their commonplace book in a very academic way, or someone else might use their commonplace books in a very creative way. Someone else might use their commonplace books in a purely kind of functional way, where like they might write recipes or things that they just really need to reference from time to time. Don't feel pressured that you need to replicate their commonplace books or systems. When I started, I was kind of looking at people like Megan Rhiannon and then just online and seeing how people use theirs, and I was trying to do that. That's why I was researching quantum physics, because let's be real, why? I mean, it's good to learn, like, don't get me wrong, I loved learning about quantum physics, but I definitely felt pressured to make my commonplace book this very academic and smart thing. And it's just, it doesn't always need to be that, you know? My second tip kind of goes with the first one a bit, and that's there is no right or wrong way to commonplace. So all of these things are just suggestions. They're not me saying, this is how you should do it. This is the only way to do it. There's 100 different ways you can commonplace. And if you look online, you'll see how other people do theirs, and you'll see just how flexible commonplacing is. Like, there is no rigid way to do it. So don't feel like just because you're doing something a bit differently that it's wrong, or just because someone else is doing something another way that they're doing it the right way and you're not doing it the right way. My third tip is keep it simple. There is so much, like, I've just information dumped you, and I don't want to overwhelm you, but really do keep it simple. Like, I guess the mistake I made with my first one was it's not a mistake because I learned from this, but something I did do was I didn't keep it simple, and that's why by the end of my commonplace book, I'm literally like, I'm doing quantum physics. I didn't keep it simple. So especially when you're starting it off, keep it simple. You don't need to do the index dots. You don't need to have the fancy books. I think just trying to get into the rhythm of what it is to commonplace, because we're so used to just passively consuming content, and then the act of thinking, oh, like, I read this quote, let me write it down, instead of just liking it. That's a new habit to form. So keeping it simple kind of helps you form that habit. So when you read something, you're like, oh wait, I actually can write this down in my commonplace book. I don't just have to like it. So in order to make that a habit, I guess, you kind of need to keep it simple, otherwise you'll just overwhelm yourself really quickly. My fourth tip is I really like margins, especially when I am commonplacing, let's say, an article or an essay. Like, this is an essay that I got from a Substack called Mind Mine about Want What You Have. It's a really good one, I recommend it. So I kind of create a faux margin. I used to draw margins, and I just became lazy. If I'm being real, I became lazy. I didn't want to write a margin for every single page. I create a gap, and that is my margin. And margins are really useful, especially for like these long form pieces, because you can like simplify the information in the text into the margin, or you can just write a simple title about what this paragraph is about. You can do a diagram. You can write a question and then answer it in the margin, so you don't really have to read all of it again. So I love margins for that reason, especially when it comes to longer pieces. They really do help. Another tip I have is read it back. Read through your commonplace books, because after all, this is a system that you made for yourself. So, go back and read it. Read what you wrote in your first commonplace book to your, latest commonplace books. Read it back, because the whole point is it's something you've curated for yourself. So kind of get into the habit as well of making yourself go back and read it, because that's kind of the whole point of a commonplace book. I also like to take my commonplace book out, so it's like you have something to read, like reading your own commonplace book. And my last tip is something I've learned from Park Notes, and it's gonna sound really pretentious. I promise you it's not. It's called a contemplatio, and it's literally the Latin for contemplation. I'll link his video where he specifically goes into depth about it, but I've kind of done it in my own way. So the blue ink where I write my own commentary or analysis, that is me contemplating on the things that I wrote. So sometimes I'll read a quote, let me start that again, and I immediately have a thought or a response to it. And I think writing those down is just as important as writing down the original quote. So I like documenting my own thought process to whatever I'm reading. I don't have it for every quote, I don't have it for everything, but for the things I do have it for, I think it's important to write it down. So I use a blue ink and I try to respond to what I'm writing. Again, not everything needs a response, but some things like a certain quote might make me feel a certain way, and I think it's important for me to write that down. I think it's important that commonplacing isn't just a copy and paste activity, but it's also a copy and paste and engage with what you're pasting activity. So that is my last tip. I'm so sorry if this video just feels like a bucket of information was dumped on you. I'm so sorry, I don't want it to feel like that. I guess I just want to give more clarity about what commonplace books are and how you can do them, where to start, and ultimately, the biggest takeaway I would want you guys to get from this video is there is no right or wrong way to commonplace. This is a starting point and advice if you're confused, but this definitely isn't like a step-by-step guide of exactly what the perfect commonplace book looks like. It's just an idea. So please don't feel overwhelmed. I really hope I made sense and I had some valuable input, because there's so many resources out there, and I'll link as many as I can if you want to go watch them or read them, and I'll put them in the description. But I really hoped it helped. I really enjoy commonplacing and I find it fun. At the end of the day, commonplacing for me is a very fun self-care activity. It feels like yoga for my brain. So I just want other people to find the fun in commonplacing, and not see it as this like intimidating, purely like intellectual thing. It can be fun, and there's loads of people who make it fun. So yeah, please write in the comments if you have any more tips or advice, or if I've missed anything out, because I'm pretty sure I did. There's no way for me to cover everything. And thank you so much for watching, and I hoped it's helpful, and I hope I didn't make anyone feel overwhelmed. Thank you again. Until next time, bye.